Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M, Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Jourden Moore, and our special guest today is Zoe Moore. Hello, Zoe.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
And Zoe was honorably discharged from the U.S. Army following 12 years of service, and she completed a master's in hospitality, recreation, and tourism, and then started an event planning company in Oakland, California. So she has a lot of interesting information and about how she got involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Uh, Focusing on those areas. But first, we're going to learn a little bit about her. One of the things that I was very intrigued about is your name.
Mhm.
Chiriga
Sh-
is your name, and you're
Um,
known as Zoe.
yes,
Yeah, tell us the story behind that.
absolutely. My mom named me Chiriga, and it's Chiriga. And she was going to name me Gertrude, but she loved the name Chiriga. She found it had a connection to Native American tribes, and it means child of poor parents in some regard, and then others, it's loyalty or a person that is of loyalty. So that's the meaning. But when I was in college or just after college, I started going by the name Zoe because I used to do spoken word, which is where you on stage do poetry. And that's kind of like when people are applauding, they snap their fingers. And this gentleman comes up to me and he says, this is the second time that I've heard you speak. And I just feel like I'm in your zone of energy. I'm going to call you Zoe. Shook my hand, he walked away. And I was like, but my name is not. And then later on, someone asked me, and they said, hey, what's your name? I said, Zoe. And I was like, oh, I just called myself Zoe, and then it stuck for the last 20 plus years. So,
Oh, wow, what a story.
yeah, so
Yes.
zone of energy.
Well, both names are beautiful with beautiful meanings. You mentioned that you learned from attending meetings and events and being in the tourism industry that diversity, equity, and inclusion were not prioritized.
Yeah, yeah.
What was your observation about that?
One of the things that, from my experience coming into the industry, you see international this or global tourism. And then when you look at these organizations that are based in the US, there isn't a wide representation beyond Anglo American or and so you begin to wonder like where are Asians, where are Latinos, where are African Americans. And it's so important because tourism, not only is it global, international, even domestic, there needs to be representation of all kinds of groups. And so I would look into each community and start asking questions about their commitment to tourism, events, and started looking at data and just got really interested in making sure that businesses knew about associations so that they could have access to opportunities and help communities thrive. So yeah, I just saw that there was a need and I wanted to address it in a way that how can the tourism industry help to bridge gaps across the business ecosystem?
That's wonderful. And there are in some places, the words might be included that there is diversity and inclusion, but then when you are
Hmm.
there, you realize, well, the words are there, but the actual experience is not.
Exactly. And I saw that a lot around like Cultural Awareness Month. Sometimes groups didn't know what to do to, highlight different religions or to make sure that they were properly, serving the indigenous community or Chaldeans. That, it was almost as if, the Cultural Awareness Month would come up or, we start talking about different menu items and we were more reactive because we didn't have those resources within the association or a company that represents a particular city wasn't connected with someone from a certain community to bring them in as an advisor. And I was like, why are we reactive? We need to be proactive by building those networks in advance, so when different events come up we have representation from all diverse social identities and we're properly doing it, not culturally appropriating, but doing it in a way that is genuine and actually amplifies the voices of so many different amazing people, across our world. So,
I
yeah.
love that word genuine, to
Yes.
have it genuinely done rather than kind of prepared to make it look a certain way. So yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
sometimes when you have the hands-on experience, I know that we talked about you having served in Iraq and your observation and connecting to the people. There's nothing like connecting to a people.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about your experience there, but I wanted to ask you, you said that when you saw the situation, so you decided to become a certified diversity professional.
Yes. Yeah. You
What,
know,
what is that, and like what was the
mhm,
experience to become certified at?
absolutely. So when you notice something within, the larger business when you're among, professionals who have been in the industry for 20 years, I didn't necessarily speak the language of the industry. I was new to it. I was a student entering the industry and coming out of the Army for 12 years. So I knew there was an issue. I just didn't know how to address it in a way that it was going to resonate with those in business. And so by going to get my certification with the National Diversity Council, it just gave me insight into not only just business language, but what was it that I was trying to accomplish when I said that diversity should be integrated into the business strategy. And so going through that certification, it was 1 week certification. It was very intense. It was like 8 hours a day. And it was just other business leaders, whether in events or in other areas of business, and really learning, the history of, just civil rights movement within the US, and also touching on some international different events and occurrences, but really molding that language around why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important to a company. You look at the numbers now, and McKinsey, Harvard, Oxford will all tell you that the more diverse your leadership board is, it's an increased opportunity for revenue. So about 36%, more increase in revenue. And there's no company that doesn't want that. And so you begin to identify and speak the language of CFOs and CEOs, and you say, look, by having a homogenous team, you're actually doing a disservice to yourself and your intended audience, because again, they'll be reactive and engaging with diverse communities instead of being educated and having cultural competence. So
And then what did you end up doing with regards to you formed your own company?
yeah, the certification really empowered me, right? Like I really reached out to the team. I resonated with the team at National Diversity Council, constantly trying to find ways that I could collaborate with them, and starting my business, because having the CDP, what I didn't see was a lot of certified diversity practitioners within the hospitality industry. And so it was more generalized. It was in finance, it was in tech, it was, in different aspects of business, but it wasn't a major or prioritized topic within the hospitality industry. So I was like, okay, well, I'll get into, being more of an event resource broker is what I was initially. And that was being the bridge between small minority owned businesses and corporate event planners, and just making sure that when contract opportunities came up, I was advocating for those businesses to be, procured. But then, 2020, the world shut down and I was closing down my business. I was just kind of doing a lot of work, but wasn't actually making the revenue. So I was more just a volunteer advocate. And so as I began to shut my business down, the murder of George Floyd took place, and I'm sitting here in Marietta, Georgia. And then all the emails that I had made previously talking about diversity and equity and inclusion, the fact that I was certified and that I could help companies, build and diversify their preferred vendor list, started flooding my inbox. People wanted to know how to write an anti-racism statement, how to, support, whether it was Black owned businesses or do a better job at supporting women owned businesses. And then there's the rise and increase in Asian hate, and people wanted to know, how do we have these conversations at work? And so transitioning into a consultant, where now I've started Moore Consulting Agency and I do business as Grow with Zomo. It's about facilitating dialogue. It's about making the business case for diversity. It's looking at, assessments and audits and really helping companies navigate how to be better and how to strategically implement, an equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy.
So, you know, um, the whole thing that the George Floyd, really the murder of and what happened to him was just affected the country. And I remember when I was watching that, you just keep thinking, like, how is this happening? How is this like in broad daylight? All these feelings that go inside of you, and not that. Um, I guess you saying that people were reaching out, I was thinking everything, every negative or some disaster or something that happens,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you'll hear something that makes you feel like, okay, well, you feel that at least something is going on where people care, for what happened, that here they are, they're inflating they want to talk about this. So for a second, I was like, oh, that there's some kind of a good thing, even though you feel like there's really nothing good, because
Right.
there's this mixed feeling about it, that why does it get to that point? And then
Mm-hmm.
we have to go back, and why not just kind of be in that mode and be interested in that beforehand?
Right.
Sometimes there's that little frustration, but still at the same time you think like, okay, so people cared enough to make sure that they
Mm-hmm.
don't want to see something like that happen again to anybody,
Right.
anybody,
Right.
white, black, Asian, any
Right.
human. We can't even stand it for like to see animals get like, and
Yeah.
so that's a good thing that people were reaching out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was.
Incident.
It would it, like what you're talking about. It's kind of like this duality with being a martyr, right? He never signed up to be a martyr, but there is an image of his daughter sitting, I believe, on George Floyd's best friend's shoulders, after the court case, or after everything, protest around the world, and his young daughter said, "Daddy saved the world." And it was really emotional, because for his young daughter to realize, like, everybody's talking about my daddy, not just here domestically but internationally, because human rights were violated, and it wasn't just a black issue, it was everybody's issue. And it really allowed people, because we were in the pandemic, everybody was still, in a sense, and finally got a chance to listen. And then we began to explore the history. Like, this is nothing new. Not only were people from the black community being treated um, with injustice, there's so many communities who now started to come together and say, hey, we too, like, our community was being deported, our community is being, ICE is coming in, or we're being, we're not given the same equal opportunity, or we feel threatened in these communities because people don't serve us the same way. And so people collectively started to say, hey, we don't have to tolerate this. And us coming together as across the world to protest these issues shows that we're starting to move forward. I think we're having, deeper conversations, and I want to be the voice to have more strategic conversations. What is it that we're really saying? It's not just something performative where we want you to, throw up the fact that you love Iraqis, or the fact that you love the Chaldean community. We want you to do something that is economic investment. We want to make sure that there's housing, education, and protection, and so how do we, as the tourism industry or hospitality meetings and events, how do we contribute to that conversation? That's where I exist in the intersection of all of that.
Yeah, and I know, talking about the Iraqis and the Chaldeans, and I know I became aware when we connected that, you served in Iraq. How long were you in Iraq for?
So I was in Iraq for initially 6 months total. I was supposed to be there for 3 weeks, and I was there for 6 months.
Okay, so there was a bit of a stretch than what you thought.
Yeah.
What was your, what would your experience be during war? But with regards to, knowing Iraq from a distance as a country on a map, and the
Right.
people that you see on the screen, versus being in that country and interacting with the people.
Great question. I traveling internationally, at first I entered through Kuwait, right? So Kuwait was my first time in the Middle East altogether. And I was in tears. I was fascinated. I had never been out of the country, out of the North America. And so that was, that was my first experience. And then, in convoys or in Humvees driving, north. And I ended up in Tikrit is where I stayed the most. Um, but, I think what it was you get a briefing before you go in, and we serve a purpose. We're soldiers, right? And so we have to be on, hyper vigilant and making sure that we're there to serve and protect, or we're there to have, serve a certain mission. But then when you see kids and you see people who look like you, or you see people who speak Arabic, and you get so fascinated with the culture. And there was times, because I was there before the height of the war, before it became like a conflict that, lasted as long as it did, where I got to engage with the community. I went to colleges, I ate street food, and I talked to Iraqis that, that actually had studied in the States, and, they were just fascinated with our presence. And so it was one of those things where I was like, these are human beings. Like I've never, okay, the briefings that I got made me feel cold. And then the actual interactions in the community made me curious. And yeah, so I always wanted to learn a little bit of Arabic. I wanted to learn more about, the college and their experience. And yeah, I just got really, really curious. So that's what it exposed me to.
Yeah, and there's nothing like being amongst people. I
Oh,
believe that's why I always love so whenever you're here, Zoe, in Michigan, make sure. Well, you're going to be a little bit far, but if you get closer to my area, I love to have you people over, because there's
okay.
nothing like that experience of
Yeah,
going into somebody's home, enjoying a conversation over dinner, tea, or coffee. Just that experience is really what makes people understand each other. uh,
right.
and we're discussing this, and this is how I feel now when watching what's happening in Ukraine, and you think about everybody on
Mhm.
all different sides. You think about the Russians, and you think about the Ukrainians, and you see all these sites kind of, and we all hope to arrive to a place where we understand the value of everybody having individual freedoms, individual rights,
Right.
not that we can all live together. This is what inclusion is. We're talking here about the hospit, and I love that word, the hospitality. As the Arab world is known for, they love hospitality. When you have a stranger come, or considered a guest coming into your house, you have to go out of your way. No matter what, they can't be an enemy once they become a guest, once they enter your
Right.
home, and
Yeah.
just have to take care of them. And we have to be like that to the whole world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Learning that, I was seeing, I'm like, a master's in hospitality. Just that alone, we all need to have a master's in hospitality, because it will help us learn how to be with other people.
Yeah.
Tourism, one of the things that I traveled quite a bit before I had kids, and all over the world, and I thought, that's another thing, is that when you see other parts of the world, and the
Mhm.
experience is always in the place that you stay in, how you are treated and how welcome you feel, but seeing other places around the world also opens your eyes to other cultures and other people, and you learn quite a bit, and then you just,
Yeah.
whatever you don't like, those are the things that you decide, what, this is the part of the this is what I don't want to adapt into
Mhm.
my life, but the wonderful things and the interesting things, I want to do that. Um, so, and I know that you're now, so aside from your business, you're also leading a conference that will take place, partially, I think you said you might be online, but it will be take place in Traverse City.
Mhm.
Tell us about this conference and the dates, and how can people participate, and how can even people like reach out to you,
Absolutely. So for the conference is called the Pure Michigan Governors Conference, and I'm a speaker or facilitator for a breakout session. Last year it was in Detroit, and I was a keynote for the conference, and so I was called back to focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion. So it will be in Traverse City, April 19th through 20th. So it's very much a part of my business because, working with Visit Michigan, Pure Michigan is a part of what I'm doing, working with different CVBs, Convention Visitors Bureaus, and DMCs. Yeah, so I'll be talking about the reason why I reached out to you, which I'm glad that I did, was the panel that I'm shaping is called Diversity is Not a Monolith. And so as it's in reference to Chaldeans, like if you take language, Arabic, right? Arabic in if you've learned in Iraq versus if you learned in Michigan or you're from North Africa, Arabic can be different. There's different ways that you engage. Your religions may be different. The way that you dress, the food that you eat may be slightly different. And so people need to understand that when we're talking about diversity, it's just not lumping people who are, it's not about non-white, it's not about non-this, it's about all the ways that people identify socially, physically, mentally. And so to have this conversation, I want to speak to a student. I want to speak to a member from the Chaldean community, someone from the Grand Traverse band of like Chippewa and Ottawa. I want to, get several leaders to be on a panel together, whether that's virtual, pre-recorded, or in person, to have a discussion around, what does it mean to serve your community? How can the tourism, hospitality, meetings, events, and tourism industry do a better job of amplifying, each community's voice, recognizing and embracing the differences so that we can identify our similarities and come together, and so, yeah, I hope that that conversation that we have, in April will be focused on, some very practical ways that tourism professionals can integrate what the panelists say into how they do business.
And what you're saying now about how there's that tendency to lump people together, that if you're from a certain area, then there's assumptions that are associated with you. And it seems like the topics that are of concern to you are only what the mainstream thinks that those are your topics. So, women from our culture, men from our culture, children, we have different types of issues and challenges and and we often feel unheard and misunderstood because of the fact that there's just a couple of things that are picked out and those are become the focus, and all the underlying other things are just kind of like shoved aside. So I appreciate they're trying to open a dialogue to all of it. Um, what is causes this kind of generalization? Is it, and how can we overcome that when, how can we open dialogue when there's so much things that are put up, kind of, it seems like barriers, like, well, you can't discuss this and we can't discuss that and you can't go this way and you can't go that way because this. So then on one hand, there's this encouragement to open dialogues. On the other hand, you're told, well, no, but not this and not that and not that. And so oftentimes, and I know a lot of people where this has happened, and even for me, it becomes such a struggle to even have an honest conversation, because for me, being honest and genuine, as you said, is so important. How can we navigate this and truly get to the bottom of what it is without having to, like, we're walking on eggshells with our words?
Yeah, I say education. That's always going to be my answer. Sometimes I respond to that question in a way that I want to, like, really spark dialogue or jar somebody. So I'll say it's ignorance that a lot of people don't know how to engage or manage conflict. We're taught to avoid conflict. So if someone's different than me, someone thinks differently than me, then I hide away. I run away from it because my way, is the only way, and their way is weird or strange. These words that we use, and I think education is what's going to bridge gaps, and education in a way that it's not where I'm teaching you how to memorize information, but I'm encouraging and empowering you to critically think. So if someone tells you that a group of people from Iraq are this way, you have to be willing to challenge that. Like, you told me that they're all violent, and that's not what I experienced. Or when I reached out and engaged the community, I was fed, I danced, I hung out with the kids. And so with the information that I was told conflicts with what I experienced. So, how do I reconcile that? And that's that ability to challenge your biases, and say that when I do have differences with people from a certain region, or I've had experiences with one person from that community, that doesn't mean that's a representative of the entire community. And so that's the problem I think that people have, is a lack of education and engaging with communities, again, to know that, like, I love to take something that we all relate to, a piece of food. If we talk about rice, I say, let's take rice, something that we all eat, and show that the way that it's made in, South Carolina, and the way that it's made in South Iraq, and share the fact that, oh my gosh, the flavors are similar, the grain is the same, and I eat our rice this way, you eat your rice that way, and through food we can connect, right? And so that's education through something that we always do, something that we have to do, we have to eat. So when we bridge our communities together and explore each other and not judge each other, then I think, again, back to that curiosity. I became curious once I touched the ground and I heard people speaking and I saw people walk around, and I wanted to know, and I wanted to get, I wanted to lead with curiosity, but it was always about education.
Well, I know that we and people have a lot to learn from you, because when you reached out to me, this is just the essence of everything that you're saying is part of who you are, and I could feel that. So you don't just use words. We can feel from your experience that you understand the importance of all of this, and that you're open to be honest. And you're right, we just have to be, we're strong enough to be honest and just to listen. Communication, I majored in communication, and
Mhm.
for me, I feel like it's a very healing, it's an opportunity for us to work through so many things and to heal. And coming from an oppressive region that I did, where the government, like, you can't talk about so many things,
Mhm.
it does sadden me when I see that people are so afraid, when we came here for these freedoms.
Mhm.
You went and fought for this country for these freedoms that we came from that country to enjoy over here. So dialogue is important, communication, diversity, all the wonderful things that this country is made of. So and you're representing that, and you're kind of shedding light. And I know everybody who I've interviewed has their own way of the way they're serving, and you're kind of like, you're serving by including everybody. So it's very exciting to see and hear that, and it's
Mhm.
inspirational as well.
Yeah.
Tell us again the title of, because I really would like for people to, and I'm gonna, once it's available, because I know it's like in the
Mhm.
preparation stage right now, add a link to this conference
Yeah.
that people. Can you mention the name again? And again, I forgot if you
Yeah.
mentioned how people can contact you, because we will have only just a couple of minutes left.
Okay. Yeah, the conference is the Peer Michigan Governors Conference. It's happening April 19th through 20th in Traverse City. And if you want to learn more about it, I'm on LinkedIn. That's Chiriga, Chiriga, aka Zoe. Instagram, LinkedIn, Grow with Zomo. You can find me there, GROW with WITH, Zomo, ZOMO. And so those are all the ways you can connect me. My phone number, 413-353-GROW. So it's all about growth, and so that's super important to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. And we're honoring Women's History Month. So this is part of why you're here, aside from all the inclusion and everything else that you represent. But thank you for all that you're
My
doing.
pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. And then also you may be one of the panelists, right?
Oh yes, I may be. Yeah, I know you invited me, and because of scheduling and the distance, but I might be able to do online. So that would be wonderful. I'd be honored.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful day.
Okay. Thank you.